My name is Vanessa Clarke, and I'm 31 years old. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. When my grandfather passed, he left me a $10 million inheritance, money meant to secure my future. But my parents and sisters stole it, dragged me out of the family home, and called me worthless. They thought I was broken. They thought I was defeated. But my quiet plan shattered them. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe. Drop a comment where you're watching from. My grandfather, Henry Clarke, was my anchor in a stormy sea. He was a self-made businessman, the kind of man who built an empire from grit and integrity, yet never lost the twinkle in his eye. His laugh wasn't just a sound, it was an event, a booming, heartfelt thing that could chase the shadows out of any room. But more than his success or his charisma, he saw me. In a house where I was treated like a piece of furniture, useful on occasion but mostly ignored, Grandpa Henry saw the real Vanessa. From the time I was a little girl hiding behind his legs from the loud voices of my parents, he adored me, and I adored him right back. Our family home, a beautiful old house in a leafy Chicago suburb, was bought and paid for by Grandpa Henry. He wanted his son, my father Daniel, to have a stable foundation. But that foundation felt more like a stage, and the play was always about my younger sister, Lily. My parents, Daniel and Ruth, were the directors, and Lily was their star. She was the golden child, the sun around which their entire world orbited. If Lily got a good grade, it was framed. If I aced an exam, my mother would nod and say, "That's nice, dear," before asking Lily what she wanted for dinner. Lily was spoiled, praised for breathing, showered with endless attention and material things. I was the other one, the serious one. That's what they called me when they were being polite. Other times I was too quiet, too intense, or my mother's favorite, ungrateful. I learned early that my feelings were an inconvenience. I wasn't cold, as they so often claimed. I was just exhausted. I was tired of trying to draw warmth from a block of ice. Grandpa Henry's study was my sanctuary. It smelled of old books, leather, and the faint, sweet scent of the pipe tobacco he rarely smoked anymore. He'd see the look on my face after a dismissive comment from my mother or a cruel jibe from Lily, and he'd gesture me in. "Come on, Vanessa," he'd say. "Let's talk about something real." We'd discuss history, politics, the stock market. He taught me how to play chess, not just the moves, but the strategy. "Always think 3 steps ahead," he'd advise, tapping his finger on the board, "and never let them see your plan until it's too late to stop it." I remember one afternoon, I was about 15. I just won a citywide debate competition. I came home clutching the trophy, my heart soaring. I found my parents and Lily in the kitchen. "I won!" I announced, holding up the gleaming award. My father glanced up from his newspaper. "Won what?" "The debate tournament. I told you about it." "All right. Good for you," he said before his eyes returned to the page. My mother was busy admiring a new bracelet Lily had cajoled her into buying for her. "That's nice, dear," she murmured, distracted. "Lily, does this clasp look secure to you?" Lily rolled her eyes at my trophy. "Wow, a trophy for arguing. So you." The pride I felt just deflated, replaced by that familiar hollow ache. I quietly took my trophy to my room and set it on my desk, where it felt less like a victory and more like a reminder of my invisibility. Later that evening, Grandpa Henry came over. He walked straight to my room, bypassing the others. He'd already heard the news from a friend whose granddaughter was in the same competition. He wrapped me in a huge hug and examined the trophy with genuine admiration. "This is magnificent, Vanessa," he boomed. "Absolutely magnificent. Your grandmother would have been so proud. She was a brilliant speaker, you know. You get it from her." Then he sat on my bed and made me recount every argument, every rebuttal. He listened, truly listened, and his pride was a balm on my wounded spirit. As we were talking, he grew serious. He looked towards my door as if he could feel the indifference radiating from the rest of the house. He leaned in and whispered, his voice a low rumble. "One day, I'll make sure you're safe from them, Vanessa. You deserve more than their carelessness. I promise you." I held on to that promise like a secret treasure. As Grandpa aged, his visits became the highlight of my life. He was the only one who invested in me. While my parents paid for Lily's countless hobbies, ballet, tennis, painting, all of which she abandoned within months, Grandpa Henry quietly set up a college fund for me. Education is the one thing they can never take from you, he told me, signing the papers. He saw my quiet strength, my resilience, when everyone else saw a quiet, uninteresting girl. Then he got sick. It started with a fall, then a heart scare. The vibrant, booming man I knew began to fade. I became his primary caregiver. I'd go to his house after my college classes, cook his meals, manage his medications, and just sit with him, reading to him as he dozed. My Terrence and Lily would visit, of course, but their visits were brief and strained. They'd stand awkwardly in the doorway of his bedroom, ask how he was feeling, and then retreat to the kitchen to whisper amongst themselves. I could hear them, their voices low but sharp, talking about his assets, about the house, about the investments. They were vultures circling, waiting. I was just a girl trying to hold her grandfather's hand for as long as she could. One evening he was lucid and calm. He squeezed my hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "Remember my promise, Vanessa," he rasped, his eyes locking onto mine. "Be strong. You are strong. Don't ever let them make you feel small." Those were his last real words to me. He passed away peacefully a few days later, in his sleep. The world didn't just feel colder. A part of its foundation had crumbled away. The funeral was a performance. My parents played the grieving son and daughter-in-law perfectly. Lily managed to produce tears at all the right moments. I stood in the background, a silent figure in black, my grief a raw, private thing I couldn't share with them. Their sorrow felt theatrical. My loss felt absolute. A few weeks later, we were summoned to the office of the family lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, for the reading of the will. The office was suffocating, all dark wood and leather. My parents and Lily were practically vibrating with anticipation. I just felt numb. Mr. Henderson, a portly man with a somber face, began to read. He went through some minor bequests to charities and distant relatives. My mother shifted impatiently in her seat. Then he cleared his throat and arrived at the main part of the estate. "To my beloved granddaughter, Vanessa Clarke," he read, his voice steady, "I bequeath my entire estate, including my primary residence, all investments and cash assets, totaling approximately $10 million, 10 million USD. This is to ensure her security and future, as she has always embodied the values of hard work, integrity, and kindness that I hold dear." The silence that followed was deafening. It was a physical thing pressing in on me. I could feel the temperature in the room drop. My parents' faces, which had been arranged in masks of polite expectation, froze into grotesque expressions of disbelief. My father's jaw literally dropped. My mother's hands, resting on her designer handbag, clenched into white-knuckled fists. Lily, who had been looking at her reflection in her phone screen, snapped her head up. Her eyes, wide with shock, quickly narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated hatred. I could almost feel the heat of her glare from across the room. I just sat there, the words echoing in my head. $10 million. To me. Grandpa had kept his promise. He had made sure I was safe. But as I looked at the faces of my family, I realized he had also just thrown me into the lion's den. Mr. Henderson continued reading the legal jargon, but it was just noise. The real communication was happening in the silence, in my father's reddening face, my mother's rigid posture, and Lily's venomous stare. When it was over, no one spoke. We walked out of the office and into the sterile hallway. My father strode ahead, his shoulders stiff with rage. My mother and Lily flanked me, their presence a suffocating, hostile weight. The car ride home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. That night, the storm broke. We were in the living room, the same room where my mother had dismissed my debate trophy years ago. My father stood over me, his face a mask of fury. "That money isn't yours, Vanessa," he spat, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "It's family money. It belongs to all of us. You will sign the necessary papers to transfer it into a family trust, managed by me." I looked at him, then at my mother, who stood beside him like a cold statue, and at Lily, who was pacing behind them like a caged animal. "Grandpa left it to me," I said, my voice quiet but shaking. "His will was very clear." "Don't you dare," my mother, Ruth, shrieked, her voice cracking the icy composure she usually wore. "You ungrateful brat! We raised you. We gave you everything." Everything except what mattered, I thought. "This is a joke, right?" Lily sneered, stepping forward so she was right in my line of sight. "You think you deserve $10 million? You who hid in your room with books while I was out making connections, building a social foundation for this family? You're a nobody. You're just a leech." I stood my ground, my grandfather's words echoing in my mind. "Be strong." "Grandpa knew what he was doing," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. "He knew what you all were like. This was his way of protecting me." My father's face contorted. "Protecting you? From us? We are your family. You selfish, conniving little witch. You were always his favorite, whispering in his ear, turning him against his own son." "I didn't do anything," I cried, the injustice of it all stinging my eyes. "He loved me for who I am, something you never did." That was the final straw. Daniel lunged forward and grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. "Get out," he roared, his face inches from mine, spittle flying from his lips. "Get out of my house. You're not welcome here anymore." "What are you doing?" I struggled, trying to wrench my arm free. The shock was a cold splash of water. Ruth grabbed my other arm, her long nails digging into my skin. "You heard him. Get out! You are worthless, ungrateful trash. We don't want you here." They began dragging me, a panicked, struggling weight between them, towards the front door. I stumbled on the edge of the rug, my feet scrambling for purchase. Lily didn't help. She just watched, a cruel, triumphant smirk plastered on her face. It was the look of someone who had just won a war I didn't even know we were fighting. "Let go of me!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat, raw with pain and disbelief. "Oh, we can," Daniel growled, yanking the heavy front door open. The cold night air rushed in. "You want that money? You can have it, but you won't have us. As far as we're concerned, you're dead, Vanessa." With a final, brutal shove, they threw me out onto the stone porch. I landed hard on my hands and knees, the rough surface scraping my skin. The heavy wooden door slammed shut. The sound a definitive, brutal end to everything I had ever known. The deadbolt clicked into place. I scrambled to my feet and banged on the door, my pleas echoing in the quiet suburban night. No one answered. I stood there, trembling in the dark, clutching my bruised arms. I was wearing a simple sweater and jeans. My phone, my wallet, my car keys, everything was inside. They had literally, physically cast me out. The betrayal was a physical wound, a searing pain in my chest that made it hard to breathe. The first few hours were a blur of shock and cold. I just walked. I had no destination. The manicured lawns and stately homes of my neighborhood seemed to mock me with their peaceful, orderly glow. Eventually, the adrenaline wore off, leaving behind a bone-deep chill and a crushing sense of despair. I found a 24-hour convenience store and begged the clerk to let me use the phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. The only person I could think of was Sarah, my friend from college. She lived in a tiny studio apartment across town. When she answered, her voice thick with sleep, and heard me sobbing, she didn't hesitate. "Where are you? Stay right there. I'm coming to get you." Living on Sarah's couch was a new level of humiliation. I, who had just inherited millions, was sleeping on a lumpy sofa, owning nothing but the clothes on my back. Sarah was endlessly kind, but I felt like a ghost haunting her small space, a constant, miserable burden. I spent days in a fog of grief and shame, replaying the scene at the front door over and over in my mind. My parents' twisted faces, Lily's smug smile, and the finality of the slamming door. I tried to call them. My father's cell went straight to voicemail. My mother answered the house phone once. "Vanessa," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, "don't call here again. You made your choice." Then she hung up. They had erased me. The final blow came about a week later. A sleek courier motorcycle delivered a crisp envelope to Sarah's apartment, addressed to me. It was from Mr. Henderson's law firm. Inside, a formal letter informed me that a newly discovered codicil to my grandfather's will had been found. This document, it claimed, superseded the original will and named Lily as the sole heir to the entire estate. The letter stated that the transfer of assets was already underway and that any claim I had was now legally void. I stared at the paper, the words blurring through my tears. A codicil? Forged documents. And Mr. Henderson, the man who had read my grandfather's true wishes, was their willing accomplice. They hadn't just thrown me out, they were systematically and legally erasing my grandfather's last gift to me. The betrayal was absolute. For days, I couldn't move. The despair was a physical weight pressing me down into the sofa cushions. They had won. They had everything. The money, the house, the power. And I had nothing. I was truly worthless, just as they had said. But then, slowly, something else began to stir beneath the thick blanket of grief. It started as a tiny, cold spark in the pit of my stomach. It was anger. Not a hot, screaming rage, but a cold, quiet fury. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of Sarah's TV, my face pale and tear-stained, my eyes hollow. I saw a victim, and I hated her. My grandfather's voice came back to me, as clear as if he were in the room. "Be strong. You are strong. Never let them see your plan." My plan? I wasn't going to scream or beg. That's what they expected. That would feed their victory. No, I was going to be quiet. I was going to be smart. I was going to fight them not with their weapons of noise and cruelty, but with my own. Silence, patience, and the undeniable truth. I spent the next week at the public library, a place of quiet purpose. I used their computers for hours on end, poring over legal articles, case studies, and reviews of lawyers. I searched for specialists in inheritance fraud, financial crimes, and elder abuse. I wasn't looking for a big, flashy firm. I was looking for a shark, a quiet predator who knew how to dismantle complex lies. That's how I found Michael Grant. His name kept coming up in niche legal forums. He wasn't a billboard lawyer. He was the guy other lawyers recommended for impossible cases. His specialty was financial fraud. His reputation was that of a quiet, methodical bulldog who never let go. I called his office from a library payphone, feeding in coins with a trembling hand. I explained my situation to his paralegal, expecting to be dismissed. To my astonishment, she called back an hour later. Mr. Grant would see me for a free consultation the next day. Michael Grant's office was modest, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He listened to my entire story without interruption, his expression unreadable. I laid out everything, ending with the letter about the forged codicil. When he finished, he was silent for a long moment. "This is an audacious fraud, Miss Clarke," he said finally. his voice calm. But arrogance leads to mistakes. They think because they have the money and a crooked lawyer, they're untouchable. He leaned forward. They're wrong. He explained the strategy. It would be a quiet plan. We would gather evidence without them knowing they were even being investigated. We needed to prove the codicil was a forgery, trace the stolen money, and find evidence of my grandfather's original intent. This will be expensive, he warned gently. Forensic experts, private investigators. My heart sank. I have nothing, Mr. Grant. They took it all. He looked at me, a long, appraising gaze. I believe you, he said, and I believe in this case. I'll take it on contingency, but you'll need to cover the upfront investigative costs, whatever you can manage. A surge of hope, fierce and bright, shot through me. I'll do whatever it takes, I promised. And I did. I moved out of Sarah's apartment and into a tiny room in a shared house on the other side of the city. I found 2 jobs. From 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, I was a barista, forcing smiles while serving lattes to people who had no idea of the war I was quietly waging. From 5 in the evening until midnight, I cleaned corporate offices downtown, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans in silent, empty buildings. It was grueling, soul-crushing work. My body ached constantly, but every dollar I earned felt like a bullet I was loading into a gun. Every paycheck went directly into a separate account for Michael's investigation. My family thought I had disappeared, broken, and defeated. I let them. My invisibility was my greatest asset.
Meanwhile, Lily was making it easy for us. She couldn't resist flaunting her newfound stolen wealth. Her Instagram became a shrine to materialism. There were glossy photos of her posing with a new Chanel bag, captioned, "Hard work pays off, #bossbabe." Then came the video tour of her new red Porsche, captioned, "Treating myself, #deserve it." She'd host lavish brunches at expensive restaurants, posting story after story of clinking champagne glasses and plates of oysters. I would watch these posts late at night in my tiny room, the screen glowing in the dark. The initial sting of injustice was quickly replaced by a cold satisfaction. Every post was a digital breadcrumb. Every brag was another nail in her coffin. I saved screenshots of everything and sent them to Michael. My parents were more discreet, but their arrogance was just as profound. They began a massive renovation of Grandpa Henry's house, throwing parties to show it off. Sarah's mother, a reluctant guest at one of these events, relayed the details to me. Ruth, draped in new jewels, had stood in the new gleaming kitchen and laughed with a neighbor. "We finally cleaned up the mess Henry left us," she'd said, her voice carrying. "That whole situation with Vanessa was just so unfortunate, but she was never cut out for wealth. You know, Lily is so much more responsible." Never cut out for wealth. The words were a slap, but they also revealed the rotten core of their thinking. They truly believed they were entitled to it, that I was an aberration, a mistake their fraud had corrected. They were so blinded by their own lies, they couldn't imagine a world where I might fight back. Months crawled by. Michael's team worked in the shadows. A private investigator, a former financial crimes detective, painstakingly traced the money. He found that within 48 hours of the fraudulent codicil being filed, the entire $10 million estate was liquidated and transferred to a new account in Lily's name. From there, millions were funneled into Daniel and Ruth's personal accounts. A forensic handwriting expert analyzed the codicil. His report was unequivocal. The signatures were clumsy forgeries. Most importantly, Michael unearthed my grandfather's previous lawyer, a semi-retired old man who confirmed that for years, Henry's instructions had been ironclad. Everything was to go to Vanessa and Vanessa alone. Finally, Michael called me. "We have them, Vanessa," he said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of triumph. "We have them, Vanessa," he said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of triumph. "It's time." He filed the lawsuit.
The day we walked into the courtroom, my heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but on the outside, I was a sea of calm. My two jobs had paid for a simple, professional, dark suit. My hair was pulled back neatly. I looked respectable, serious. My family was already seated on the other side of the aisle. They looked like they were attending a tedious board meeting, not a fraud hearing. Lily was in a ridiculously expensive-looking silk dress, scrolling through her phone. My parents whispered to their lawyer, their expressions confident. When they saw me, they barely registered my presence, offering only a flicker of contempt before turning away. They still saw me as the worthless, invisible girl. The judge, a nonsense woman named Judge Miller, called the court to order. Michael began, his voice even and methodical. He laid out the facts, the original will, the loving relationship between me and my grandfather. Then he began his assault. He called the forensic expert first. The images flashed up on the large screens in the courtroom. My grandfather's elegant, flowing signature next to the cramped, awkward forgery on the codicil. The expert pointed out the inconsistencies in pressure, slant, and letter formation. A clear and amateurish forgery, he concluded. I saw Lily flinch. My mother's hand went to her pearls. Then Michael presented the bank records, a dizzying flowchart of transactions on the screen. He showed the $10 million leaving the estate account and landing in Lily's. Then he showed the subsequent transfers of $2 million to my father and $2 million to my mother. A classic case of money laundering and distribution of stolen assets, Michael stated calmly. The gasps in the courtroom were audible. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of purple, but the final, devastating blow was yet to come. Your Honor, Michael said, approaching the bench with a small, worn, leather-bound box. I would now like to present into evidence personal correspondence from the deceased, Mr. Henry Clarke, notarized and authenticated by his previous legal counsel. He opened the box. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Letters my grandfather had written to me over the years, which I had saved, and crucially, copies of directives he had sent to his old lawyer. The judge began to read them aloud. His voice, his words, filled the silent room. My dearest Vanessa, I was so proud to hear about your university acceptance today. You have a brilliant mind. Never let anyone, especially your father, tell you otherwise. Another one. To my lawyer, please reaffirm that upon my death, my entire estate is to pass directly to my granddaughter, Vanessa. I'm concerned my son and his wife will attempt to misappropriate funds. Vanessa is the only one I trust to uphold my legacy. And the most damning one of all, written just 6 months before he died. Vanessa, my love, I feel my time is short. I want to tell you again that everything I have built will be yours. It is not just money, it is freedom. Freedom from them. Use it to build a life they can never touch. Your strength is quiet, but it is the strongest thing I have ever known. Lily broke first. A choked sob escaped her lips. Then she began to weep, her carefully constructed facade shattering into a million pieces. My mother, Ruth, looked as if she had turned to stone, her face a pale, horrified mask. My father, Daniel, finally snapped. "This is a lie," he roared, surging to his feet and pointing a trembling finger at me. "She manipulated him. She poisoned him against his own family." Order! Order in the court! Judge Miller's gavel cracked like a whip. "Mr. Clarke, you will sit down and be silent, or I will have you removed and held in contempt." He collapsed back into his chair, a broken, sputtering man. The lies were all gone. All that was left was the ugly, greedy truth, exposed for all to see. The verdict was swift. This court rules entirely in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Vanessa Clarke, the judge announced, her voice ringing with indignation. The entire $10 million estate, plus punitive damages and all legal fees, is to be returned to her immediately. She wasn't finished. She peered down at my family over her glasses. Furthermore, given the shocking evidence of conspiracy, forgery, and elder financial abuse, this court is referring Daniel Clarke, Ruth Clarke, and Lily Clarke to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation. It was over. Lily was wailing. My mother was staring into space, her eyes vacant. My father looked like he couldn't breathe. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I didn't look at the judge. I didn't look at Michael. I looked directly at the three people who had tried to destroy me. They finally saw me now. Oh, they saw me. I took a deep breath, and in the quiet, stunned courtroom, my voice came out clear and calm. Grandfather's voice spoke louder than yours. Then I turned, and with Michael by my side, I walked out of the courtroom and into the rest of my life. The aftermath was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was mine. The money was transferred back, the legal system moving with surprising speed once the fraud was exposed. The first thing I did was quit my 2 jobs. I slept for an entire day, a deep, dreamless sleep free from the anxiety that had been my constant companion for almost a year. My family, as predicted, was criminally charged. Their assets were frozen. The beautiful house my grandfather had bought was seized as part of the criminal case. They lost everything, not because I took it from them, but because their own greed had consumed them. I received a few hysterical, rambling voicemails and one long, self-pitying letter from my mother. I didn't respond. My silence was the final boundary, a wall they could never breach again. I didn't want their life of flashy cars and designer bags. I wanted to build something that mattered. I used a significant portion of the inheritance to establish a foundation in my grandfather's name, the Henry Clarke Haven. It provides legal aid, temporary housing, and financial counseling for young people who are victims of family financial exploitation. I wanted to give others the chance that Michael Grant gave me. I bought a small, beautiful home in a quiet part of the city, and I went back to Grandpa Henry's house, now a cold, empty shell held by the state. I walked through the rooms, no longer a victim, but a survivor. I didn't want the house itself, but I retrieved one thing: the old wooden chessboard from his study, the one on which he taught me to think 3 steps ahead. I found a new kind of peace, not in the millions in my bank account, but in the quiet purpose of my new life. The freedom my grandfather wanted for me wasn't about the money. It was about the strength to build a life they could never touch. And I had. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who should protect you? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories of betrayal, justice, and quiet revenge. Because sometimes the calmest voice is the one that shatters everything.